Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Gotta Get Running. I'm Phil Hargis. It is good to see you guys again. Alongside of me is Chris Farley, co-host Gotta Get Running. Good to see you again, Chris.
Good to see you, man.
All right, we have a special guest here in the studio today. He's just written a new book that just came out on June 5th called Eat and Run, My Unlikely Journey to Ultra-Marathon Greatness. His name is Scott Jurek, and he's sitting right here in the studio with us here in Washington, D.C.
A world-famous guest here. I mean, how lucky are we to have Scott here? Thank you for joining us, Scott. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you guys for a little bit here.
Excellent.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, Scott Jurek is really the most accomplished and decorated ultramarathoner in the world. He's run all the biggest ultramarathon races, Western states. You know, he's won that 7 times. Spartathlons, Badwater, we talked to Wardian about that last summer. A lot of the big races, Hard Rock, I mean, the list goes on and on. He's run 24-hour races. It's amazing to have you here in the studio here in Washington, D.C., Scott, to talk about your new book. We're really excited.
And the book is right here. It's Scott Jurek, you can see, and Eat and Run, My Unlikely Journey to Ultramarathon Greatness. So let's get into the book. And we'll obviously talk a lot about your running and all the activities that you've done, but what inspired you to write a book?
Well, really, it's one of those things after racing so many races, being out in the public, volunteering and speaking, people ask, when are you going to write the book? When are you going to write the book? And I was like, oh, geez, it's one of those things like I can't envision, because I know how hard writing a book is. And it's like, yeah, I'll get around to it. And finally, I just decided, it's time to do it. I really wanted to share my story more because there are a lot of people who don't get a chance to hear me speak, don't get a chance to get some one-on-one time at an event. So the idea was, let's do it. And it was really hard because a lot of people asked, hey, can we do the nutrition book? Can we do something like the running guide or the tips? And it really just came down to, I wanted to combine it all. I mean, 2 things that really changed my life, 2 things that I used to hate, vegetables and running. Mm-hmm. Here I'm an ultramarathoner and I'm a plant-based athlete, and I got to write about both. So the idea was to weave both of them together and just tell my story and then incorporate some recipes too.
Yeah, he does, and he does a great job of laying out the entire book. It's set up. You get in each chapter, you get a race experience. You get a sort of an experience you have with a significant person in your life, and then you get a recipe at the end of each chapter, and it goes on throughout the course of the entire book. And you solicited the help of your friend Steve Friedman to help you with this. Definitely,
yeah. I got to give credit to Steve because Steve's an amazing writer. He's written some of the best sports writing, particularly out in the outdoor world. I remember when I first read his article on Scott Williamson, through hiker on the Pacific Crest Trail, and this guy's an amazing writer. Really grabbed me, and if I ever wrote a book someday, I'd like to have him. And thought he'd never have the time of day for me, right. So it was great. We've had a great partnership, and he's put up with the crazy ultra runner that I am.
So it's 54th overall. It's already doing awesome. 54th overall on Amazon Books. Just real quick, how does it go? I mean, are you dictating stuff to Steve, or how is that actually when he's helping you write the book?
Yeah, it's a process. Steve actually came out to Boulder for 6 weeks, and he and I would just sit over coffee and tea and talk for hours and hours. He just I'd regurgitate all these stories, and he'd try to pull stuff out of me that I hadn't. He also had an assistant of his talk to a lot of my relatives and friends and just pull out the things that are just really hard to get out and things that I had forgotten. So gather that all together, and then it was a matter of I would write him stuff, he would work on getting my voice, and then I'd edit things as he would write them out, and kind of came up with this story in the end.
And it's Eat and Run, and I know, obviously the 2 go hand in hand. If you're running a lot, you need to eat a lot. And I myself am not a vegan. You've dabbled in it a little bit.
Well, that was in preparation for this interview, Scott. I started last week just to do a little 1-week experiment eating entirely vegan. There's a book out there called Eat to Live by Dr. Furman, and he lays out a pretty simple, eat a pound of vegetables raw, eat a pound of vegetables cooked, and then eat a lot of beans. So I wanted to see how it would go and how it would affect my running. So I did a 35-mile week this past week, since last Friday, including an 8 and a 10-miler, and eating purely vegan. I mean, the plan worked great. I mean, I lost 8 pounds, which was awesome. Mm-hmm. I felt great on the runs, had tons of energy, arguably more energy than I had on previous runs. You're thinking clearer, you're sleeping better. I mean, honestly, I'm not making this up. This is really true. I mean, even after just 1 week,
I didn't pay him off
that way.
So is it something
really did it.
You always have practiced the vegan?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, I grew up in northern Minnesota. Okay. I grew up in a hunting and fishing family. Right. I was like a backwoods boy. We had gardens and we grew vegetables, but really, I mean, I strictly meat and potatoes guy. I would eat carrots and corn and choke down peas and green beans as a kid because I just hated vegetables.
Right.
And it definitely was not something I always did. Then in college, I was eating fast food because now I had a job, so I could afford to go to the fast food joints. We never used to do that as a family, and I was like, hey, I'm going to start eating. So I ate that way for several years and started realizing that with my mother having multiple sclerosis and growing up with all that chronic disease and then seeing chronic disease in hospitals and working as a physical therapist, realized that maybe there's something different out there, and maybe I need to be looking more than just say my training for performance and for long-term health. I need to take a look at my diet. And it was Dr. Andrew Weil's book, Spontaneous Healing, that really turned the corner for me and made me think, okay, I got to look at more than just one piece of the puzzle. Nutrition plays a huge role, and as Phil was mentioning, it makes a big difference. You fill your body with junk, and sure, we all know guys and gals that perform on race day on junk, but how are they going to be performing long term, year after year and later into life? We all want to be running longer and healthier.
So yeah, let's talk about your running. So your ultra marathon. What does that consist of? What's your training like? How's it going now?
If you start a book tour, you start a book tour in New York City, and you run around Manhattan to celebrate it. That's what you do when you're an ultra, and that's what I did. On Tuesday, I ran around Manhattan, ran 32 miles. Right now, I'm kind of in the maintenance mode as I'm on tour and traveling a lot from city to city, but I'm trying to get in, 10 miles a day, depending upon the event. Every event that I'm stopping at, too, I'm running 3 to 5 miles with folks and just trying to get out there. So I guess right now I'm kind of in like absorption mode of energy from other people, but in general, an ultramarathon training plan for me would look at like probably in the 110, 120 miles per week. And then I'm trying to get in back-to-backs on the weekends. You just can't run 20, 30 miles a day all the time. Right. I mean, I pop in 10 or 15 mile runs, but a lot of my staples are 10 milers. I might incorporate some tempo and track, but it's the weekends where the big stuff comes into play. I'm running 20, 30 miles on Saturday, 20, 30 or plus on Sunday, and you try to simulate what your body's going to feel like at mile 80 into a 100-mile race.
So you're doing a lot of visits to these major cities. You've been in New York, been in Boston, you've been in Chicago. How is it for you to like run more of a city environment compared to like a lot of the trails that you're used to?
Yeah, well, I'm really blessed right now to be in Boulder, Colorado, and I've never lived so close to trails besides where I grew up in the sticks of Minnesota. Really, right now, it's like I have to kind of pinch myself. Like I've got all these trails, but I love to run just about anywhere now. I mean, that's so many of the mountain ultramarathoners prefer to be on trails all the time, and I actually like to mix it up. That's why I've run Badwater, Spartathlon, the 24-hour events. You can still enjoy the roads, and like Inwood Hills Park in New York City, up in the northern part of Manhattan, I was just blown away. Like it's just like its own little wilderness up there in the corner. And same goes with in Boston and other places I've been. You can find little nooks and crannies where it's not quite mountainous trail, but you can still enjoy it. And I think that's key for everybody. Find the enjoyment in running no matter where you are.
And that's certainly one of the points you emphasize throughout the course of the entire book. You just need to enjoy running. That's how Born to Run was. Just go out there and have fun like little kids do. It's sort of the theme of like enjoying their sport of running. The nice thing about going to these cities, you don't have to worry about like the bears or the snakes stepping on them. You have to worry about the drivers though and the cab drivers.
Exactly. Yeah, it's probably the worst thing out there. But yeah, that's really something, because I used to hate running. The only reason I did it was to get in shape for cross-country ski season, or because we had to do laps in basketball practice or something. So for me, later in life, it wasn't until my buddy Dusty showed me that, hey, running can be fun. I mean, we'd go for 2-hour trail runs, and he'd be throwing mud at me and like hollering, "You crazy Pollock," that sort of stuff at me constantly. And he just made it fun, but it just like those 2 hours would just fly by. And we just follow these little paths out in these little trails in Minnesota and connect up with ski trails. And I think you just got to find something that really like strikes a chord with running. And running's becoming more and more popular because people are realizing it's a great activity. It's easy and fun, and yeah.
And Dusty's obviously been one of the most important guys in your life. He's been there for all your top victories and your bad waters and everything. What is he up to these days?
Yeah, I was trying to get him to come on tour, but he was like chasing something out in the mountains in Montana. Last I heard, he was traveling. Oh yeah, he's just as wild. But he's yeah, he's been a huge help to me. I mean, not only inspiring me to run ultramarathons for the first time, I mean, he was the one who's like, dude, you got to try this out. You know, you got to get out and do this 50-miler. And I was like, no way, that just sounds way over the top. And he convinced me to do it. And what do you know? I'm like on the starting line for my first marathon. And next month, I'm on the starting line of a 50-miler. And that's what Dusty has taught me. I mean, he's been there through some of like the toughest moments of my life in racing when I'm like down and out in Death Valley. I described that in Eat and Run, how I just can't imagine getting up after puking my guts out nonstop for like a half hour. And he like just triggered something in me to like get back up, and we just got moving again. And yeah, he's been a huge help. Somebody, and I think that's important in anybody's running career. You have to find those individuals that motivate you and inspire you, and that's really what Eat and Run is all about. It's about those people that have inspired me along the way.
And he's always been very motivational. I mean, now, you know, having read about Dusty now in your book, now I was wondering if he was like helpful with you in like coming up with the ideas, remembering stuff to put into this book.
Oh yeah, definitely. Dusty did some interviews, and I'm sure Steve had some pretty entertaining interviews with Dusty as far as stories. But
How
yeah,
come that didn't make it into the book then?
Yeah. Well, there's a ton of stuff, I'm sure. And yeah, Dusty was very helpful, because he would say, yeah, don't you remember that rattlesnake you stepped on at Western States? And I was like in another zone, you know, just focused on, okay, I've got to crank out some 8-minute miles right now, when it's 105 degrees. So yeah, he was very helpful, because, you know, he was like the second set of eyes and ears.
So you're more of in the ultra marathon running world, you're more of a longer distance specialist and a mountain guy, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say I'm a mix. I do, you know, a little bit of both the road and the trail. There aren't a lot of guys or gals that do both really well, but I do prefer, rather than the 50-milers, 50Ks. You know, I've only run a 2:38 marathon. I'll say this flat out, I'm not that fast.
It's pretty good.
I mean, it's okay, right. But you know, in the big scheme of things, I race against guys that have 2:15, 2:20 PRs, and where my strength lies is when the playing field gets leveled, and the further you get out there beyond 50 miles to 100 miles, you've got to be adaptable, and I think it just brings down running to that pure aspect of just, you know, the simple aspect of trying to adapt to situations. You've got heat, you've got, you know, cold, you've got altitude, and you've got all these things that can happen. I mean, I talk about spraining an ankle, for instance. You know, how do you get through those situations? A lot of times, something like that happens in a 5 or 10K or even a marathon. I mean, you're toast. There's nothing you can do. Whereas an ultra marathon, you can get through those situations and sometimes win.
Right. Can you tell, I mean, not to give anything away in the book, but a couple memorable stories. You mentioned stepping on a rattlesnake or other memorable or something you're most proud of about your ultra running.
Yeah, I think one of the...
like a scariest moment, maybe.
The scariest moment probably was when I came across a bear on the trail in the middle of Western States, and believe it or not, he was actually staring down another runner, Chad Rickliffs at the time, and he was in the lead, and this bear was literally just staring him down. They were like 20 feet away from each other in the middle of a race. It was not a training run. And, you know, he's just standing there because the bear is not moving, he's not moving, and they're like just, you know, watching each other, and he's like, you know, just stand off. I come along, and I like, you know, give a big holler, start raising my arms, and scare the bear off. And, you know, it's kind of hard to, and I felt bad for Chad, because it's like, how do you regroup after that? I mean, that whole experience. So I guess that's maybe been like the scariest moment. It's funny, in ultramarathons, sometimes you don't see any wildlife, and then other times you come across them. So another, I guess, amazing moment in ultramarathoning, and I'll mention this one because it's really quite a cool story, and it's not going to ruin anything. But when I was running the Spartathlon, it was actually my second Spartathlon. I'm heading up this climb, and there's these set of lights. I just passed the front runner, and there's a set of lights coming from behind me, and those headlights come up behind me, and I'm going up basically a 15-kilometer climb, so 9 miles of just winding road up over the top before you drop down to Sparta. And I see these lights behind me, and I just couldn't believe that I passed this top runner, and I thought I left him in the dust, and he's like back at it. And this car keeps coming up behind me closer and closer and closer, and this guy's catching me, and I'm like laying down, you know, first 8-minute miles, and I'm like running uphill. You know, I dropped down to 7:45, 7:30, and this guy's still on my tail, and I just like can't believe it. This course marshal comes up and says, Scott, don't worry about the guy behind you. He's not to be worried about. And I'm like, okay, this guy must be a translation thing or something like that, that he's just trying to tell me, like, don't worry about him, he's going to die, or he's dying off, he's going to, like, implode. And I'm like, yeah, right, he's on my butt for, like, miles and miles, and just didn't stop. And then all of a sudden I get up further, and, I'm just working my butt off. And this is, keep in mind, this is 130 miles into the race. And then after, I get to the point where, eventually he goes back, and I find out later that this guy was a bandit. He wasn't even somebody in the race. I don't know, maybe my crew paid to, like, have him out there and just, like, encourage me on. But I think that's a story of how, when something, like, switches in the mind, and I think a lot of people have these experiences in 5, 10Ks, half marathons, marathons, where you don't feel the pain, you don't feel the discomfort. There's something clicks in your brain psychologically, or even something deeper. It's like a consciousness level where even though you're tired, you're toast, you shouldn't be running harder, you just find that extra strength. And that's the beauty of ultramarathon.
And the body can do amazing things.
You bet.
It's very, very true. Maybe we can get into a couple viewer questions that you got today, Phil.
Yeah, we cheated. Scott, we asked some viewers, a couple viewers of ours, to ask you some questions, and we have those right here. We'll digress. But before we do that, I want to find out where this book came out on June 5th. Where can the viewers get this book now?
Yeah.
They can get it anywhere, any bookseller, online, bookstores. It's everywhere right now. So airports, as I've been getting through, not quite yet, but it's just because they've been pumping them out to the bookstores and the larger booksellers.
And is this available in ebooks or audio?
It's available in ebook, audiobook, probably in a couple more months. So we're going to be a little bit behind on that.
Okay, and if you want to check out Scott, you can check out his website at scottjurek.com. That's SCOTTJUREK.com. And he also can be followed under all the social media stuff on Facebook and Twitter.
That's right.
Just check him out, Scott Jurek. He is everywhere, and you can track all of his runs if you want to. He keeps very good followings on Twitter. Hopefully, we got the DC thing up on the Twitter, and you get out to the Pacers for that run tonight.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and get into a couple of these viewer questions just real quick. We'll take a little one from here. Melody, who's actually also on the Brooks team. And she does a blog locally called We'll Run for Margaritas. Now, she saw your shirt that you're wearing up in yours. She wants dibs on one of those.
All right, well, she's got to come to the run tonight. Maybe I should bring that for a door prize.
She asked a really good question. She goes, you helped design the Brooks running shoe, the Cascadia and the Grit. Can you tell us more about that process and why you've chosen the technologies for each shoe?
Yeah, basically the Cascadia, that's what I was brought on with Brooks back in 2004. They told me, hey, we want you to come on board and design the best trail shoe. And I was really excited about the opportunity of giving my input into something that's going to benefit a lot of trail runners out there. Because at the time, trail runners were basically lightweight hiking boots in a way.
Right, that's true.
Really overbuilt, and the idea was to bring it down. And nowadays, it's funny, like the Cascadia is a very light trail shoe in regards to where things were, but nowadays with the minimalism and the explosion of that, and that brings me to the Grit too. Basically, we've got two shoes. The Grit was kind of like the next evolution of the Cascadia, something that people might want that's a little bit lighter weight, because we've got so many people now wanting a low profile. Like when we brought the heel height in the Cascadia back in 2004 down to 11 millimeters, which was pretty significant back then. And what I mean is basically the difference between the toe and the heel. And when we brought that down to 11, everybody was like up in arms. They're just like, that's crazy, why are you doing that? We also didn't post the shoe. We did a dual pivot posting. The idea there was that you didn't want one side built up more on the other. You didn't want a dual density just on the medial side, because you're always on terrain that's changing. So we made that more neutral, and then basically people were like, this shoe's gonna be too light. It doesn't have a post on the inside, and now look at where we are.
It's our number one shoe at Pacers, and probably the number one trail shoes, especially running. So
yeah, and it's come a long ways, and we're really stoked. We tweak it just very little year after year, but it's been a huge success, and we continue to do it. And then basically the Grit is an evolution of that for those that want the 4 millimeter drop, essentially getting closer and closer to that zero drop. And then we also lightened up a lot, brought the base of support. I kind of got the idea from looking at sandals and what the Taramarans were using. So you have this wide base of support. So the whole shoe has a wide platform, so it's very stable on uneven terrain.
It's a great shoe.
Yeah.
Brooks is our number one vendor too.
So Scott just mentioned the Tarahumara Indians, and a lot of people out there watching probably know Scott from the book Born to Run, by Christopher McDougall. It's a very popular book, and it was about your experience out there in the Copper Canyon with Caballo Blanco. Now, unfortunately, he just recently, died in an unfortunate running accident out in New Mexico in the Gila Forest out there. I know that you guys were very close buddies, and how has it been for you since he's gone? And did you do anything special to memorialize him? Because he was actually from Boulder too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he spent a part of his summer, usually every year, in Boulder. He was very nomadic. He'd either be down in New Mexico in the Copper Canyon or in Boulder and floating around. He was traveling, speaking, raising money for the races that he was putting on down the Copper Canyon. So now I actually went down and participated in the search after I got word that he was missing. So went down and searched, and really as far as memorializing him, I mean, he had some of his best buddies from around the country, around the world, searching for him. It was pretty incredible. So even though we weren't necessarily memorializing him at the time, in some ways we kind of did that, and it was one of those send-offs where if I had, I guess, gone out into the wilderness and something happened to me, it'd be a good way that my buddies, I think, would be able to memorialize me. But we did a special little memorial in Boulder, Colorado, and people came from all over and had a great little ceremony for him. We did a run up in the mountains there, and yeah, it's really sad. Obviously, people ask, what's going to happen. We're going to continue the work down the Copper Canyon. In fact, what I'm doing on the tour is raising money for the CaballoBlanco.org Foundation. We've raised close to $5,000 on all the tour stops. And so races are going to continue. They're going to find a new race director, and I might head down there this year and really make sure things are kicking off again.
Yeah, they had a sold-out speaking engagement last night in Chicago with like 450, 500 people there to raise outstanding money for his foundation, which is just great. Let's go on to a couple of fun questions here, or let's do one more viewing question.
Yeah.
My running coach is
this is a good one.
He's done he did the Western States a couple years back, and he's wanted to ask you. I've got it right here. He's run Western States. He wants to know, how do you manage your calories during a 100-mile race?
What I basically do is, and this is something anybody can do, I'm generally putting in anywhere from 50 to 75 grams of carbohydrate per hour. So I'm eating every 20 to 30 minutes, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 grams of carb, which is about 100 calories. And the way that somebody calculates that on their own is you take your body weight in kilograms, multiply it times 0.7 on the low end, and then you take that and multiply it times 0.1. So essentially, body weight in kilograms times 0.7. You also, there's two formulas, body weight in kilograms times 1.0, sorry for all the math here. And then each of those basically will give you high and low, and that'll be the grams of carbohydrate per hour. And that's why my range is 50 to 75. And essentially what I'm doing is getting in those calories via sports foods, Cliff gels, I'm doing drink, I'm also doing blocks, that sort of thing. But then, in addition, I like to do some real food just to mix it up. So I do potatoes, bananas, particularly early in the race, first half of the race. Even things like bean and rice burritos. Some of the recipes in the book, actually, for like hummus wraps. Right. I like to take those on training runs, bean and rice burritos, because there's nothing like when you're on a mountain pass. Take a little breather. Obviously, in a race, I'm not sitting down and enjoying the scenery, but in a training run, I just enjoy that. I mean, sports foods are great, and they have their place late in a race. I mean, I'm not going to chew on a bean and rice burrito, but sometimes it's nice to have something that isn't, so sweet, and something that's a little bit more savory. So a lot of the recipes I talk about, taking leftovers on the trail and mixing it with sports food. But essentially, that's what I'm doing: 50 to 75 grams of carb per hour.
Great answer. Yeah, and he's a wizard, as you'll see in the book. But like, he can take any ingredient, vegan ingredient, and put it together, and like, boom, boom, poof. You have a recipe at the end of the book, and they all look great, man. They really I can't wait to try some of them out. I actually wanted to cook some of those up and bring them on the show today, but here we are.
We gotta get your chef hat on next time.
Yeah, man. It's spoilers. You guys gotta try those yourself.
Yeah. All right.
So this is great. You have an extensive tour here coming up.
Yep.
You're gonna be all over the country here. You go to Portland, you go to Seattle on June 12th, San Francisco, then you go back home to Boulder and Los Angeles, and then Austin, Long Lake, East Lansing, Grand Rapids, Seattle, and Denver. You got a lot of tour stops. You got a busy month ahead of you.
Yeah, I've got to somehow fit some running in there.
And are you doing any races planned after the book tour?
The plan is to continue my training. It's hard. I've contemplated doing Leadville, but it's a little too close depending upon the selection with the 24-hour world team. So the 24-hour world championships are in Poland, which I have a strong Polish heritage.
Right.
Really stoked about maybe racing over there. Have a huge following. In fact, Eat and Run is going to be translated into Polish, believe it or not. So yeah, I've got a huge following over there. So hopefully I get an opportunity to race there September 8th and 9th, and see if I can bring that American record up a little bit higher.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and if you can't get in Leadville next year, I'll be there with you next year to run it.
Sounds good, Phil. That's awesome.
Let's do it. Okay, well, cool. One last local question for you here. I know a couple years ago you did the JFK. I mean, how was your experience in running that race?
Oh, it's been on my list for a long time, and usually by October I'm totally just fried because I've already raced 8-9 times per year, and I just decided one year, my buddy Ian Torrance, who's done I think he's done it for, I don't know, 15 straight years. He's like, you gotta do this race. I'm like, okay, I'll get out there, and it was a blast. It's a tough course, coming from somebody who loves the mountains. It definitely kicks your butt because you've got the AT section initially, then you've got the towpath, which is 25 miles. Right. But it's a great first-time event. I think you get a little bit of everything. You get the technical trail, you get the towpath, and then you get the road finish. So it really is a good test, I think, of whether you've got road or trail skills.
A little bit of everything in that race.
I ran it. It was awesome. Yeah, it was fun.
All right, guys. Well, we're getting ready to wrap things up here. Scott, just thanks so much for taking the time to come out here and talk to us about Eat and Run: My Unlikely Journey to Ultra Marathon Greatness. This is your book. It just came out a couple days ago. You can get this online everywhere. You can get it in bookstores. It's available everywhere. So make sure you go out and get a copy of it. It's about running. It's about eating, and it's about a way of life. I mean, it really is, and it's outstanding. I just want to say thank you to Christina Mamangakis for helping set up this entire interview. She's with Hoot and Mifflin Hardcourt, so thank you, Christina, for that. And I just want to say congratulations too on your recent engagement as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a lot going on right now.
And I wanted to say thanks to the Nature Conservancy, who I know you're working with as well, and they helped bring Scott to our store, which is going to be a great event tonight. So.
Yeah, we're going to have a great event and raise some money for my Africa trip and tell a few stories regarding that, and really excited about that. So that's my next thing on tap is a trip over there. So I'm actually doing a marathon. So hopefully I won't get chased by a black rhino.
I mean, just a marathon, man.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, listen, man, continued success on everything.
Thanks for having me, Phil. Thanks, Chris.
Really awesome. And, we really appreciate it, man. And it's an awesome book, and we appreciate everything. And we will see you guys next time on Gotta Get Running.